Hi, how are you? It's Iris Classon, and I am back with another stupid question of the day. And I am terribly excited because tomorrow is my last day at work, and then I'll have a full month of a vacation. It's holidays and it's summer. The weather is beautiful outdoor. As you can see, I turn really dark in the summer. There's been a lot of sun, which is not normal in Sweden. We usually don't get fantastic weather, but it has been awesome, and I believe it's going to continue to be like that. So I get to spend 4 weeks with family and friends, my baby, my partner, doing sports, being outdoor. We're going to Norway. Jotunheimen is absolutely amazing. So I'll make sure to record some videos there as well. It's just going to be a great summer, so I'm very excited about that. And honestly, I really need the vacation. So yes. Anyways, to the question. Today's question is all about passwords and connection strings and all those little secrets you probably don't want to share with the world. Should you check those into source control? Because that's a closed off world, right? A lot of you might, be thinking, well, why do you even ask such a silly question? Because obviously you shouldn't be checking things like that into source control. But some of you might be thinking that, well, I don't see the problem if the repository is private. Why not? And also might be a good way to track who's been changing passwords and also get, some history over time. All right, so I decided to ask this question on Twitter. I however, asked the question if have you accidentally checked into source control, passwords, connection strings, yada yada. And the way I framed the question was obvious that my opinion was that this is not a good practice, not a good thing to do. And I want to know how many people had done it by accident. 17% said yes, often. Then 52% said yes, rarely. 24% said never. And then 7% said they weren't sure. The 7% should definitely go and double check the repositories. So, all right, let's discuss this, because there are never any really straight answers. Although, me personally, I'd say no, don't do it. Do not check into source control sensitive information, even if it's a private repository, self-hosted. Don't do it. There are many reasons for that, according to me. One of them is, once you get into that habit, it's really hard to stop doing it. So you keep thinking, oh, just this once, it's a private repository, and then you do it with something else and something else, yada yada. And if these are personal passwords, people tend to use the same password everywhere, so you got quite a big problem if it accidentally, becomes visible for somebody else, and it's for your eyes only. So I wouldn't do it because it's a really bad habit to get into. It can also create problems for other colleagues. Say that you have a system that has different passwords depending on the setup, environment and yada yada. Now, every time you check in, your password is going to overwrite somebody else's and so on. So sometimes it will work, sometimes the system won't work, depending on who checked in what password. This is assuming that you use different passwords. It's not the biggest problem, but it's a little bit of a hassle. The way we've solved this, for example, when we're using local connection strings or different types of connection strings, if you want to test with the databases in the QA environment or AT environment, what we do is we have a configuration file locally on our computer that never gets checked into source control. And when we're building our assemblies, we will look in the configuration file if we have anything that we're trying to override in our config file, and then we'll pull out the local connection string and we'll use that instead, but it will never get checked into source control. So that's one way to handle it. A different way is by using secrets. This is something from ASP.NET Core. They didn't invent it, but there's been a lot of talk about these so-called secrets. Now, these secrets are basically just environment variables. So you can set environment variables for the machine or a process or for a user, and we use this quite a lot. So we have sort of a utility helper class that will go and look at a configuration file only if it can't find this information as an environment variable. And then we use environment variables for connection strings and very sensitive information. When we deploy to our different environments, we have this stored encrypted somewhere really smart and secret that nobody can access, and it's definitely not checked into source control. So it's a very easy way to manage it, and also an easy way if you need to swap something out on the go and you don't want to swap out the whole configuration file, then environment variables is a good way to go. But back to checking things into source control. Another reason I wouldn't do it is, so the first one was it's a bad habit to get into. And the second one, you can't assume that the repository is going to be private forever. It might accidentally be public one day, or somebody forks it and then makes the fork public. You don't know. Then you had another issue, I lost count, so I'm just like showing fingers. Another issue with checking in sensitive information is that obviously your colleagues and everybody who has access to the repository are going to pull it onto their machine, and then you lose control over what happens to it. So somebody's computer gets stolen, or somebody accidentally puts something on a file share, their Dropbox or G Drive or whatever. You know, you just lose control. So you want to have control over sensitive information. And by putting into source control, you're basically sharing it with people, and you sort of lose a lot of the control where it ends up. So it's better to use a vault of some sort, a password vault, password manager, something like that. I reckon that's a much better way to go about it. That's my opinion. And yeah, finally, I also wanted to add, because this is something somebody brought up, which I think is a very good point. I don't like mixing development with deployment. So for me, passwords and connection strings and so on, it's more of a deployment concern than development concern. To solve the development part of it, when I need to develop locally and I need a connection string locally, we use this configuration file that overrides the existing configuration file and doesn't get checked in, that I talked about. But otherwise, when we deploy, I don't want this information to be in source control, because it doesn't really have anything to do with the development. So deployment details, I like to keep them separate. You can keep those separate on some sort of continuous deployment service. We use Octopus Deploy. You store the information encrypted there, and then it just basically sets up your configuration files before you deploy. Or you use a script and you set environment variables to the machines you're deploying to. And there are different ways to manage this, but the sum of it all is that it's not from source control. And if you were to have this in source control, you probably would want to have this in a repository that is separate, and it's private, and is very restrictive in terms of who has access to it. So yes, I'm sure I missed out on a lot of information now, but these are just my thoughts on the topic. And I've got like an hour and a half left before the baby wakes up and wants his dream feed. So I'm gonna make sure that I get to do some cleaning at home. Thank you for watching. I'll make sure to record more videos, and have a fantastic weekend and a lovely day. Bye bye.